Okay, hello, welcome to a brief video on rationales, primarily for people doing a Microteach on the award in education and training, but it's also useful for those people doing train the trainer or doing a PGCE. With a PGCE you're going to need a lot more theory and a lot more referencing. So rationales, and there's different templates. So here's a template that I'm going to use in just a minute just to go through it. But there are other templates. So here's another one. Group profile. You can see this is designed for Microteach. Environment, intentions, cross-cutting, structure, approaches, resources, assessment methods, feedback. So basically, most or all of them will basically cover the same sort of thing. So I'm just going to use this one for now. A rationale is the reason behind your teaching, and they're used in Microteaches, but also if you're going to get observed in your setting, be it a college or a school or a workplace or community, and that can be by your organisation or by Estin or Ofsted or similar. And what a rationale is doing is it's supporting your session plan because it's giving the reasons and the thinking behind your teaching, which is really quite key. A good rationale really helps you, and any session plan will just drop out of it. Okay, so I'm going to just go down some of these sections here. Now note the content might be different. You might be using a different template or whatever. So context of the session. So this is group and the physical space. So for example, I might be in a classroom, and I'm just going to note down what I would note down is what's in that room. So there is a projector, a electronic whiteboard. Sorry about my spelling, people should know that by now. Electronic whiteboard. There is a flip chart, stand and paper. Tables set out in conference style, so that just means you basically got one big table sat around. If you've got groups, then we call that cabaret style, and you've also got rows or lines of a circle. So, and what this is all doing is it's sort of giving you anything that you need to do. For example, if there was no projector or electronic whiteboard or flip chart, then when I come into the plan, it's going to tell me, oh, I'm going to need to bring something to cover that if I need to. We can also note the room is well lit, and in this case, let's even have some dimmable lights. The good thing about dimmable lights is it helps with regard to Erling syndrome or people with light sensitivity. If the lights are not adjustable, then you might have to consider, is that going to be a problem for your learners? We'll come back to that in a minute. And we might also note, sometimes if you're teaching a community hall, the room might be freezing cold, so you'd also notice that. Room is quiet, but with windows open. Road noise can be loud due to buses or main road or something like that. Now, the reason you're doing this is it shows you know the space, the physical learning space, but also things that are in there could impact on the session. For example, you could have cables trailing across the floor, because that's then going to bring in a health and safety issue that you're going to need to deal with. So the group, and you talk about the number of learners. So in this particular case, let's have a dozen. Well, what I could note with the room is I could note size suitable for 20 people. You know, some rooms certain sizes. If you've got a room that's suitable for 20 and you've got 40 people in it, you've got a problem. And if you've got a room that's suitable for 20, you've only got 3 people in it, equally it could be a little bit too echoey. So number of learners, group have been together for 10 weeks and all work well together. So we could, if you know about your group profiles, you could say that that was what we would call a performing group. I'm noticing that in this rationale at the moment, because if I've got a group profile and they're a performing group and they're working well together, then I'm not going to need to do an icebreaker, but also it means I can set group activities right from the start. I don't have to develop those groups or develop that rapport. Another thing to note is no known ALNs. Nobody might have disclosed any. However, you suspect possible dyslexia, Erling's. Let's even put autism on here, because that will impact upon what you're going to do later on. So context is quite important. So context are the learners, the group, and the physical space. Now you could also put adult learners. A lot of people will say to learners, new word though, a lot of people will say to also put in gender. I've stopped doing gender because just because you're doing the group as how it looks, unless you've got more information, and just because somebody has the look, physical sex of a male or female does not mean that's what their gender is. So if you're going to do gender, then do think about transgender issues, etc., etc. Okay, aims and objectives. So this always catches people out. Aim is the overall thing. Objectives, LOs. Now these you'll see as learning outcomes, learning objectives, learning objects, and sometimes learning criteria. The aim is the overall aim of the session. So this might be a session on an introduction to planning for education, planning rationales or something like that. So it's basically the aim of what you're trying to do at the moment. Let's put an introduction, right? So that would be your aim. Now, if you are delivering a course that's already part of a qualification, your aim often comes from the scheme of work and or qualification. And qualification. And qualification. Wow, what a big mess up there. Your objectives then. So this is where you get what we call threshold concepts coming in. What you're trying to do is what learning objectives would have to be reached in order for my learners to reach the required aim. So I've got planning for rationales for education, but it could be how to bake bread, or introduction to baking bread. So then what I would have to do is break that down into what could be achieved in that session. So it could be identify the ingredients required, I'm not going to write the whole thing out, but you would identify the ingredients required, ... It could therefore be identify the method to bake bread. So that would be, oh come on, you're going to get close to that here. Okay. And it's a good idea is to number or letter them. I tend to use letters because it's a personal preference, but also it means that and you might see this if you see a session planning video, is that sometimes you've got numbered criteria coming from your qualification, and I like to put those in my session plan as well. So I just have these because it's what was going to be done for the session. And then you're going to bake bread. So maybe, I don't know, it could be, because you might not have time to actually bake bread, so it could be some kind of, well, they might bake bread or they might make a dough. You'd have the other objectives until you reach that. So what we will do is we'll jump up, discuss, how to bake bread. So I probably should have picked a different one. So the identifiers tend to be what we call those lower domains in your Bloom's taxonomy or solo taxonomy. Discuss means thinking about it and is more in depth, and the learners have to really engage and talk about it. So that tends to be what we would call a higher domain. Because it's a rationale, what we want is, let's just use a different colour. Let's use a bit of purple. So why have I chosen this? I chose this aim as this is a standalone session, and any other reasons for you choosing it. If it's coming from a qualification, you can say that this aim has been come from the qualification, and it's at this stage within the particular course, because it might be session 1 of 5 or 10 sessions, whatever. Here, the reason you're talking about these is normally I have chosen these measurable, because these are these identifying verbs, chosen these measurable verbs, measurable learning objects as they focus on the key elements and when combined will achieve the desired aim. So it's just where you got them from. Now then, if you're going up to, I mean, it's nice at all levels to have a little bit of referencing. So for this, I'm not going to go too far into it, but your objectives, if they're measurable, then where are you getting that from? Why is that important? Why have they got levels of learning in your higher domain, lower domain? It's probably where you're going to be including Bloom's if you're using it, or solo. And then, once I've done that, then I'm going to do my teaching and learning approaches. Now, this is quite an interesting session. So, one, I'm going to, one might be, I will have a tutor introduction, aims and objectives, etc. And then if it's the first time with the group, what I might have is notices and admin. So wherever the toilets, etc. etc. So you're going to go through basically structure what you're going to do. So this is my aim, these are the objectives, so is what we're going to be doing today. Then what I might do is I might have a PowerPoint presentation. Oh, let's have a video. A video of bread being made at home, and then what we might do is we might discuss the video and ask if anyone has baked bread before. So because I'm asking if anyone's baken bread before, I am now assessing prior learning. If I got people who have experience, that then adjusts what's going on. The video is a nice visual resource. Visual provide something a little bit different. And then what we might have is we might have a some kind of activity. I'm going to switch from doing bread or do something else. So an activity such as for a drawing activity or an art activity. Learners, I'm deliberately not trying to do one session plan because I know that people, or rationale people, will copy it. Activity, learners to draw 5 different shapes, etc. So I'm going through the different approaches now. Those are what we would call our pedagogical footsteps. They are each section of the session, breaking it down into what you're doing, and we tend to recap and revisit hellos and aims, which is kind of closing the loop. So here you're opening the loop. This is what we're going to do. These are the things we do. These are what we've done. This is how we did it. Did we do it? Did we achieve our goal? And for each of those, what's important is why have I chosen this approach? That's what I need to know. Now, recapping and revisiting learning aims, usually the tutor says, okay, we've come to the end, what are you going to do? But I might come up with a different method here. Tutor to facilitate discussion on what was achieved. So ask, what have we done, learn today? So instead of the tutor leading it, I'm going to have the learners tell me what they're going to do. So now that is a different way of doing it. It's what you would call an active learning, and I would do that because I've chosen this approach as it empowers the learners and allows the learners to say what they think they have done. It's too easy sometimes for a teacher to say, okay, so this is what we've done today, rather than asking the learners what they've done today. It's another way of reaching them. So I might have a discussion, and the reason why I have discussion helps develop deeper learning and is a student-led approach which fits adult informal learning. So I'm giving the reason for the approaches that I'm doing, which is the key element. So there we go. Discussion is a video. So what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. Look at that. What I'm doing, why I'm doing it. Why, how, what, how, why. Later on, if you're at a higher level, then you would actually start putting your references here. I like to see lots of references and citations. For example, if I'm going to have adult learning, then I might have looked at somebody like Knowles. It's student-led, so I might be looking at Rogers. I would have to develop that a little bit for student-centered learning. You might even have Maslow, because he's humanist. And it tends to be more of a humanist type approach because the learners are making it relevant to them. Maybe not. I'm not going to give you it all. And visual. Now you might say that that's learning styles, but we're not going to go into learning styles because they don't exist. But what we will do is that it might trigger a bit of a domain. So when you've got a video of bread, not only is it in the cognitive domain because it's information, but it is also in the affective domain, in the fact that it's this particular video, which you haven't seen, I'm not going to share because it's me making a mess of everything. It tends to make people, how do you feel about it? How do those textures? And with baking a bread and making bread, there's a lot of kinesthetic and feeling to it. So looking in this section for what domain is it? Cognitive, affective, psychomotor, or psychomotive, or more than one. Is it student-centered? Is it tutor-led? Is it constructivist? Is it social constructivist? Yeah. Discuss, because that actually requires social interaction. It's some kind of social learning. But the main thing is discussion can be used to construct the learning, which would be social constructivist, almost exactly as Vygotsky wants it to be. Okay, cross-cutting and embedding. This is quite important. So this is where we're looking at literacy, numeracy, digital literacy, ESDGC, and because we're in Wales, or I'm in Wales, Welsh language and culture. So this would be some notes of how am I going to embed that into this particular session. So what we might talk about bread from around the world. So that's fits into DGC in terms of cultural and understanding of different cultures and different cultures' approaches to bread and diet. What we might also do is we might look at air miles and transport costs of ingredients. So, but you'd have a look at literacy, numeracy, digital literacy, ESDGC. What I will say is try to get as many of them in your session as you can, because it's really quite important for contextualizing and making literacy, numeracy have value and understanding to individuals. If you're not embedding it in a session, say you're not embedding it and say why you're not embedding it. Resources, so then you would talk about the resources you use. So going back to this arts type thing, I'm going to use paper, and I'm going to use pencils, 4B and 2B. Okay. Why do I want to use those? Needed for learners to draw. What I might sometimes have is you might have purple, just a reason. Sometimes what you might have is a handout. See, now I'm in purple all the time. You might have a handout, and the handout might have instructions on how to make dough, and this time maybe they are making dough. Now, why am I using that? Well, it helps learners to know what they are doing. Now, if you remember at the start, I noted that I might have somebody that's autistic. Now, with autistic people, they really like the structure. Usually, not all the time, but they like the structure. And a handout that basically provides that structure is helping that person know what they're doing, what they're going to do next, know what they're doing, what they're going to do next. So I could say that I've deliberately done that for helping autistic or dyslexia. And what I could do is on the handout I could differentiate it by using images as well as words, and that helps people with low literacy skills. So it's what resources you're going to do, why you're going to use them. So a lot of people will have, and it would be nice to have less PowerPoint because it can be death by PowerPoint. So what is on the PPT and why are you using it? So why have you decided to use a PowerPoint? That's the quite important thing to include. One of the good things about a PowerPoint is you can have your information on there. You could talk through it, but then you can also provide that so that people can then go back through it afterwards. Or if you've got people who are dyslexic, etc., or have processing issues, you can send them the PowerPoint beforehand or content beforehand, so that gives them a chance to understand what's coming along. Assessment. So assessment are your assessment methods. Oh, let's do types first. Types, methods, and how and why. So you might use initial assessment. I tend to call it APL, Assess Power Learning. Discover who has done this before, and use as MK, more knowledgeable others in session if required. You might also set them some slightly higher tasks or something. Okay. So initial assessment, discover initial assessment. Right at the start, the reason is for that, and you would do that. How would I do that? I'll do that by questioning or asking, who has done this before. Yeah, asking, questioning, or asking who's done that before. So now then, key ones will always be formative. Now ideally, every single section of your session has a matching assessment type method. The whole point is learning and assessment go together. So formative, so whilst I've got a thing whilst they're watching a video, I can't really do much in that. So in the video, I might observe learners during video and use Q and A after video. So I'm going to observe to see whether they're watching the video and it seems to be having any kind of effect. And then after the video we can ask some questions about it. We had an activity, the drawing, if you remember, because my baking thing went off track. So now I shall just go make that black. So formative, and this is during the drawing activity. Now during the drawing activity you can basically observe the learners and intervene as required. So this is where you let them do it, you sit back and you're watching, you're using your observation skills, and you can then step in when you needed support and then step back out again. Okay, so that's what the tutor's doing. Learners will self-assess, have you drawn the relevant thing, so you might give them something, but can also critique, peer assess others. And then there might be more formative things. Everything throughout the discussion is a formative method of assessment as well. The three most common, they're not exclusive, but the three most common things, if you don't know what your assessment strategy is formatively, it's likely to be questioning, observation, or discussion. Those are the three most likely to be used formative assessment methods. And then and you can use them for initial, you can use them for formative, you can use them for summative, but they're especially common in formative. And then summative assessment, so sometimes this is just checking the LOs, has learning taken place. You might have a quiz, you might have an exam, etc., etc. And so that is to check that what you set out to do has been achieved. So it's closing the loop again, and the method that you use, you want to argue or just explain why you've chosen. So why did I choose to use a quiz, or why did I choose to use a post-session discussion? Now, it's a lot of the why you're going to do it. That is the key, the key, the key, the key. Most templates will have some clues on. I've taken the clues off of this one. But it will ask you whether it's the same layout. It will have a lot of these things in. We need to know who you're teaching and where you're teaching. So that's the context. So group and the space. We need to know your aims and objectives. Now, on a Microteach, they tend to be standalone, but you might say, I've chosen to do this particular subject as it is one that I'm likely to be delivering when I become to teach. So I'm giving a practice of that because that will help me. I've chosen these outcomes as they meet the relevant elements. You might find that they've come from somewhere. If they've come from somewhere, then tell people. And then this is the section, each section of your session plan. This is what I'm going to do, why, and what basically underlying stuff there is helping you choose why you're using it. What you're going to do, why you're going to do it. Cross-cutting, how you're going to do it, and maybe why. You know, why is that important? Miles sand or air miles and. Your resources. Ideally, the resources are helping and enhancing and supporting the learning. And that's what you're trying to say when you show, oh, these help because this is why it is of value. And then your assessment methods. What assessment methods are you using? How are you using them? And why have you chosen those particular methods? The other thing that is useful to note is what evidence of assessment are you capturing, what evidence is. Now sometimes this can be during the formative stage as well. It doesn't just have to be summative assessment. You know, if you've got some pictures of whilst people are doing things, that helps you to see how it was going, and it also shows formative assessment in action. Okay, so that's rationale. Not quite so short because it always takes longer than I think it's going to take, and obviously I've used one particular one. I just want to go back and find the other one. Yeah, so there's obviously this other one that hopefully now you're looking at. So you're looking, it's the same thing, context, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, why, and then feedback. So that's another one I didn't notice on mine. How are you providing feedback during a session? It's probably just through verbal, but you might have other methods. Okay, so I'm hoping that's going to help with your rationales. If there are any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you.